Hi, everybody. I just want to introduce Courtney Bailey. Courtney, I believe I've made you co-host as well.
Mhm.
Okay. Courtney Bailey is an English language lecturer, international teacher trainer, and curriculum designer with more than a decade of experience in K through 12 higher education and English language teaching leadership across global settings. You are currently ABD in a PhD program, Courtney? Yeah?
That's
And
correct.
and specialize in creating inclusive, learner-centered curricula for culturally and linguistically diverse learners. Courtney has delivered educator training in over 10 countries and serves on the NAFSA leadership team as the Intensive English Programs Coordinator. In this role, she supports initiatives that promote linguistic justice, digital integration, and professional development. So thank you for being here with us today, Courtney.
Nathan, thank you.
Thank you.
So we can go ahead and get started.
Yes,
Good
yes.
morning. Okay, good. Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And happy Saturday. I'm so happy to be able to share a bit of time and space with you all. I'm so proud of you guys and excited that you are here because it's Saturday and you guys can be anywhere else, but you're choosing to be here and invest in yourself and to learn more and to grow. So I don't take that lightly. We're so happy that you're here to share this space with us. And so I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Give me just a second to pull that up. And I did share a link. Let's see here. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. I'm just going to wait a little bit longer because I see that there's still some people joining. Okay. So I'm going to encourage you during this session to go ahead and share. Really, this is your time and your space, and I really want you to reflect on what it is that you do, your philosophies, your mindset, your beliefs, and what you actually want to incorporate into the classroom. So feel free to open your mic if you'd like to. Feel free to make use of the chat box, which I will often prompt you to do so. And I also encourage you to have a notebook or a piece of paper or something that you can take notes on so that way you can actually reflect on your own practices. And then finally, I would like to share that there are some information heavy slides, and that's intentional. And the reason why I did that is because oftentimes when I attend PD, I can't remember what the speaker said. I get little bits and pieces and I have my notes, but when I go back to reflect, I can't really remember everything that was said. So I would like for you guys to know that some of these slides are information heavy, just so that if you are to go back and receive the information and try and absorb it, it's all there for you. Okay. And I also shared in the chat box, and I'll share it one more time before we get started, a link to all of the materials that I'm sharing with you today. So even though this is being recorded, you'll have access to all of my materials immediately. So, the title of my presentation is called Teaching on Purpose, Using Reflective Practice to Shape Instruction. And it's my hope that by the end of the presentation today, you will have left feeling inspired to reflect, and you'll feel reconnected with your why, or have a better idea or a better understanding of what your why even is. And so I've designed this presentation with both the new teacher and the seasoned teacher in mind. So maybe you're reconnecting with it, or maybe you're trying to develop it. Okay. So we'll go ahead and get started. And as Mason said, I'll slow it down because he said it really quickly. And I know that we saw people coming in, but I am an English language lecturer, an international teacher trainer, and a curriculum designer. I will work in both domestic and international context, and I do have, I'm earning a PhD in English language learning, all but dissertation right now. I have delivered teacher training in more than 10 countries, and I serve with NAFSA. So NAFSA is an association that is it's for international educators. Okay, just trying to calibrate and making sure that we're serving international students, regardless of where they are in the world. Well. And my work includes organizing international ELT conferences, advising institutional leaders, and mentoring teachers. So I say all this because I want you to know that if there's an organization that you're interested in, or if there's something, I like to use these PDs for networking. So if there's something that I've said that resonates with you, or if I can guide you or help you in any way, please let me know. As far as the overview for this presentation, we've just done the introduction. We're really going to talk about why reflective practice matters. We'll do an interactive reflection activity. We'll talk about some practical applications. So we're going to talk about our beliefs and then our design. How do we actually start a lesson, and how do we incorporate what we've planned effectively for our students, regardless of the context, if they're young learners, if they're adult students. We'll do some final reflection and takeaway, and then question and answer. But I want to set our intention, okay? I want to set the tone, and I want to make sure that we understand what our goals are. So by the end of this session, I hope that you guys will be able to define the purpose of a teaching philosophy. Also explain how philosophy informs your decisions about teaching and learning. I also hope that you will be able to articulate core values that shape your instructional approach. I want you to be able to reflect on your own practices that support your professional growth. And then also recognize the role of reflective practice and intentional value-based instruction. So there's a lot of wording there, and I'm going to break everything down. And like I said, if you joined a little bit late, some of these slides are very information heavy, but again, that's intentional because I want you guys to be able to take this after the fact and reabsorb it and really connect with the information being shared. Okay, so I'm going to invite you to use the chat box for about 3 minutes. Okay, and I want to know what originally brought you into education. Why are you in your educational role, whether it's a teacher or maybe you serve varying roles. Okay, so what originally brought you into education? And what is a teaching philosophy in your opinion? Okay, so you have about 3 minutes to answer those 2 questions in the chat box. Now, this does not have to be polished. Don't worry about spelling, grammar, or anything like that. Okay, this is just for us to start the reflection process. So again, what originally brought you into education? And what is a teaching philosophy? So I will give you some time to answer those questions. And so that I'm not glaring at you, I'm going to turn my video off, right? In 3 minutes, you're going to answer those in the chat box. Thank you so much, Christina. Is there anyone else that can share again what originally brought you into education and what is a teaching philosophy? So Christina says interest brought her into teaching, and a teaching philosophy, she says, is key principles of one's teaching, I suppose, wanting to help people achieve their goals. Kennedy says, I've wanted to be a teacher since I was little, maybe 3 years old. I think a teaching philosophy is like your own belief system regarding how you teach and what you think a teacher should do or be like. May says to support the student to achieve their goals as a part. I was born a teacher. Good, good. These are all great. I'll give, I know that these are thoughtful responses, but I'll continue to wait for just a little bit. To help people succeed, to do something that I'm interested in, ideas you believe in and ideas you try to stick to. Teaching is someone's passion. Teaching is the art of mixing different methods. Wonderful responses, wonderful, wonderful responses. To help poor students, support with great teaching, lifelong learning opportunities is a reason, and then to prepare and sharpen learners' knowledge to engage in the complex world. It's the job of the prophets. Okay. Shan says, I love teaching kids and it makes me happy. And number 2, the most important thing that can shape people's future and opportunities. You guys, I love these responses. You're so thoughtful. Thank you so much. Perfect. Perfect. And if you're still thinking, that's okay. I want you to think this is a reflection session. So if you still continue to add those to the chat box if you haven't yet done so. But you guys are absolutely right on track. Okay, so why does a teaching philosophy matter? Yes, it clarifies your purpose as an educator. It guides your instructional decisions and priorities. It communicates your core values to students, peers, and institutions. It does fuel your self-awareness and your professional growth. And it aligns your teaching with the evolving needs of your learners, right? So we do know that teaching is ever evolving, it's ever changing. We're in the 21st century. We've got lots of different tools and resources that are available to us. So I'll say that my teaching philosophy in the past, it's evolving and it's changing with the needs of my students and with the landscape of education and specifically with language teaching. So we do need to evolve with our students and with our learners and with the curriculum. In our teaching philosophy, it really does serve as a compass to guide your educational practices. It's your compass. It's what you do. It's how you design your lessons. It's how you implement your lessons. And so we need to recognize that. And a teaching philosophy matters because I have never been in an interview that has never asked me, they've always asked me, what is your teaching philosophy? And in the beginning, I used to be stuck. I didn't know what my teaching philosophy was. And that was a problem to me because I always feel like if I don't know my why, then I don't know my how, right? So we need to understand who we are as people. We come into the classroom with different belief systems, with different lived experiences, with different ideas. And so all of that helps to create our teaching philosophy. So understanding why it matters definitely informs your practice, okay? So there's some scholarship, and I just want to say that this is something that there's some buy-in in reflective teaching, and there's some buy-in in teaching philosophy. And we see that here with 4 different educators. So Barbara Larrabee in 2008, and again in 2020 said reflective practice involves not only a way of thinking about teaching, but also a way of being. So a habit of inquiry, growth, and ethical commitment. And you guys, again, I want you to think about what these quotes are saying, so that way we can apply them as we get further into the presentation. Zeichner and Liston in 2004 collaborated, saying that reflection must move beyond classroom technique to examine the social, cultural, and political context of schooling. And then Rogers, who was inspired by Dewey in 2002, and then again in 2011, said reflection is not a solitary act, but one that gains strength through collaborative inquiry and openness. So when we're reflecting on our practices, on what we do in the classroom, on our teaching philosophies, yes, it's deeply personal because it involves us as individuals. But as Rogers has said, it's not just a solitary act. We should be collaborating in spaces like this, using one another to get ideas, and not just with educators, but with our students as well. We're directly in the line of contact of our students, and they are who we are trying to grow and to develop. So collaborating, it's extremely important. And so it says down at the bottom why this matters. These perspectives shift reflection from a personal habit, okay, personal, to a core principle design, shaping what we teach, how we teach, and why it matters. So again, yes, reflection and understanding who we are as educators, that's people first, and then as educators, is deeply personal and deeply important, but we should also be thinking about how we can do this in open spaces with our colleagues, with our peers, and with our students. So I've got a tool that I'm really excited about that I've adapted from Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins is a life coach extraordinaire. He is deeply wise, and he has impacted so many different people. I encourage you to look him up if you're unfamiliar with him, but he is extremely powerful in just the way that he conducts himself as far as his compass, and the way that he talks and interacts and reaches millions and millions and millions of people around the world. And so I adapted this educator reflection wheel based off of one of the seminars that I attended from him, and it's called Unleash the Power Within, although his was more personal. So on his will, he had things like relationships, spirituality, finances, physical and mental health, things like this. And I thought, wow, this tool is so great. We can adapt this to, to the educational space. So that's exactly what I did. And so I want to kind of explain to you how to use this. And as I said, I did share the link in the chat box to the Padlet with all of the materials and resources, but I do want you to think about how to use this, okay? So we have, let me move some things around on the screen. So we have this wheel here, and there's seven different categories that I came up with, but you guys do not have to use this, okay? These are just ideas as I was doing my reflection and saying, okay, uh, where do I tend to focus? What is meaningful to me? So I'll break down these seven categories so that way it makes sense to you, okay? So it says student engagement and inclusion. So what does that mean? We hear all these words all the time, but sometimes, no one has broken that down for us. So student engagement, at least for me, as far as the way that I was thinking with this will, is the voices in your educational space. Are your students, regardless of who they are they paying attention? Do you invite those voices into the space? Is there participation, and not just participation passively, but active and meaningful, engaged participation? Is there motivation in your classroom, and is there ownership in your classroom? So that's student engagement and inclusion. Okay. Pedagogical clarity would be teaching that makes sense in the way that your learning goals are clear and evident. Your students understand your instructions, your expectations are clear, they're understandable, and they're accessible to everyone, right? So that's your pedagogical clarity. Your celebration, and a lot of many times as I've done this, I realize that we as educators are not celebrating. Maybe we celebrate our students and their wins and their successes, but are we celebrating ourselves? Are we celebrating the fact that we gave a great lesson, or the fact that we're reflecting and saying, okay, that wasn't such a great lesson. What went wrong here, and how can I improve? Right? Are we celebrating the fact that we are sharing this space together on a Saturday and we're learning and growing? So how do we celebrate ourselves as educators? And then also, how do we celebrate our students? Your environment, okay, so important. And a lot of the times we don't think about this as well. So your environment is actually the physical setup of your educational space, regardless of what that looks like. Maybe that's an office because you're teaching online one-on-one. Maybe it's an actual physical classroom. It's the emotional tone that you bring to your classroom. It is your classroom culture, your inclusivity, and how your space actually feels. So again, I want you to reflect on these things because all of them are important to the way that you serve your students and the way that you serve your learners. Moving over to the left with professional identity. So this is how you see yourself as an educator. Okay, what do you call yourself? What's your title? Does your title matter to you? I know that some people say I'm an educator, or I'm a lecturer, or I'm an adjunct, or a tutor. Whatever it is, what is your professional identity? What are your values, your beliefs, your strengths? What's your purpose? How do you show up, and how do you make decisions for yourself that informs your practices and the way that you engage with your learners? Okay, so your professional identity. Your feedback and assessment, okay? We know that we have formative. So the goal for the formative assessments is to improve learning. Those are the the quizzes, the class discussions, the drafts that they may submit. And then we have summative, where we're measuring learning, right? So those would be the final exams, the major examinations, the projects, the portfolios. How do you do with that? Do you design your own materials? Are you looking for something that's more relevant and useful to your particular context? How do you deliver feedback? Is your feedback timely? Is it useful? A lot of the time when we give feedback, it's just great job, keep going, is it something that your learners can take and use and implement immediately in order to improve? Okay. And then your time management and workload. So that would be your planning and your instructional time, your grading, the feedback that you give to your learners, your office hours, and how available you make yourself, and then also your personal boundaries. Before, we're educators, we're people, right? Just like before your students are students, they're people as well with whole entire lives. So we do need to have that work-life balance. So we need tools like this in order to engage and reflect. So I've explained all of these 7 categories to you. So let me explain how to use this tool, right? So if you look at this, we have a scale, we have numbers that says, in the middle, in the center would be 0. So that means for that particular slice, okay, for that particular category, you're not happy with that at all. Okay. And that's something that you need to improve upon. Maybe, it's 20%, maybe you're 60% happy, or maybe you're 100%, everything is going really well and there's no change that you need to make. That part of your instruction, your philosophy, your design, everything is going well. Okay. So what you're going to do is consider this as your education reflection wheel. Okay, for these 7 different categories. And what you would do, and here are my instructions, it says use this adapted wheel to assess your current satisfaction by shading in each area from 0 to 100. So your wheel is going, it might look a little bit jagged. Hopefully, it would be maybe at 100% and everything feels good and your practices and what you're doing works for you and for your learners. But that's not likely. That's not realistic. We are always growing and evolving and developing in our spaces, right? That's our responsibility to our students, is to continually grow so that way we can serve our students in the best way that we possibly can. So what you would do then is use this tool, like I said, to shade your satisfaction scale. So I don't think that we have time for this, but I'm going to show you what it looks like. Okay. And please forgive my shading. I didn't shade, but I did actually show you what it looks like as a sample. And it's really hard to use those online tools, but you can see that this wheel is jagged. It's not even. Would it roll? Yeah, absolutely. Would it roll towards my goals, towards my intentions? Absolutely. But probably not effectively. It will get where I need to go, but there might be some bumps along the way. Okay. And so we need to fix that. We need to fix those bumps so that way we can have more confidence as people and as educators. And that in part gives that confidence to our students, which completely changes and shifts the energy in your classroom space. Okay. So we see here, if this was a sample, someone doesn't feel very good with feedback and assessment, right? They're only at about maybe less than a 20%, whereas maybe their strength is their pedagogical clarity, which we went over, okay? Their celebrations for themselves and their students and their professional identity. But still, we see that there's some difference there. There's some variation. And so then after you complete this, and once again, you have access to this in the link that I shared, and I'll make sure to share that again and show it to you. But would this wheel roll smoothly towards your goals for your classroom space? What is the biggest imbalance? So we see on this particular wheel for this particular person, it's feedback and assessment. Okay, that's where they, where our energy goes, or our focus goes. So right here, we see where there's some shortfalls. And then finally, which areas affect your learners and you the most? Okay, it's very important to reflect on this and to see really what our practices are and where we're falling short, and then also where our strengths lie. We can't, we tend to go directly into our shortfalls, and maybe we might harp on that, and that's great for reflective practice. But also don't forget the time to take the time to celebrate yourself and see what you can do with that. So that's a lot, right? That's a lot. And again, this is a tool for you to use in your own personal space, but I want to make sure that you guys are very clear on that. So what you guys will receive is this educator reflection wheel that's blank. So that way you can create this in your own space. You have the sample. Okay. So that way, again, what am I doing with this? What is my goal here? So this is an additional component. So that way we can close that gap. Right here, we have all those same categories. We have time management and workload, the student inclusion engagement, everything that we saw on that educator reflection wheel. And we have steps here. So it says, which one do I want to focus on improving? Sometimes, we can't multitask. Sometimes we need to just focus on one that's most important for our practice, for what we're doing at that time. So right here says, which one do you want to focus on improving? And so this person has chosen clarifying professional identity, right? So right here, right when you see these numbers, remember, when we look at this is on a scale from 0 to 100, but maybe you don't necessarily want to be at 100. And I know that sounds really weird to say, but sometimes maybe our 100% is 80% in that particular category. It's okay to say that. Okay. So what is your 100%? Okay, is that 90% for time management and workload? Okay, maybe you don't want to be, in control of, or maybe you know that it's not likely that you're going to be in control of your time and your workload all the time. You know, you have other people, out making demands and asking things of you. So maybe 90% feels more reasonable rather than 100%. Maybe you do want 100% for student engagement. So again, you're going to calibrate this so that way it's meaningful and impactful for you in your practices, in your philosophy, in your design. Okay. So, what you're going to do is you're going to figure out where you're at now, which again, that's here, okay, with these particular percentages. And you're going to just work on bridging the gap. What do you need to do in order to get there? And again, that goes back to your teaching philosophy, your teaching design. What do I need to do to be the best possible educator for my students? So that way I'm giving them useful, relevant materials, that I'm creating a space that engages them and that helps them to grow, not only to be successful in your content or in your discipline, but successful as people. They're watching you, they're learning from you, and you're serving as the model in that space that you occupy. So understanding where you're at, understanding your reflective practices is extremely important in order for you to move forward and to build that classroom that's meaningful and impactful. Okay, so here it also encourages you to be proactive and think about the second step. So once you kind of bridge that gap, right? Once you understand where you'd like to be, what you need to do in order to get there, and where your percentages stand, right? Once you understand that, you're going to think about the second task. What's the second thing that you need to focus on? Because we should always be focusing on improving ourselves in our educational spaces, just because, like I said, we're always the landscape is evolving and it's changing. So we've got our first goal. We focus on it. We see how we can close that gap. We've got our second goal, and we want to understand what's one thing that we can do today. Or actually, let me go back. What are three most important actions that you are committed to taking in order to close the gap? Okay, so let's go back to goal number one, clarifying my professional identity. So this person has written, number one, revisit and rewrite my teaching philosophy. Number two, seek feedback on my strengths. And then number three, align my daily practices and core values. So those are things that you can implement and take action on today, immediately, right? And this is what we want to be thinking of. And then, like I said, after that, after we focus on what we can do, what's the second area? Maybe where we see where it's maybe 20% or 30%, where it's very small on that educator wheel. What's something else that you'd like to focus on? And then what's something that you can do to make progress on that today? So this person has said feedback and assessment would be the second priority. Give clear next step feedback students can actually act on. Remember, I said a lot of the times they're saying, this is great work, well done, good job. But is that really useful to our learners besides the celebration? Okay, we can go a lot further with this. And so I won't go over it too much because, as I said, you'll have access to it, but this is a great tool for you to use to reflect on where your shortfalls are, but also understand where your strengths are. So that way you can bring your best into the classroom. And so I want to say that by pausing to reflect, we align our values with our actions and bring greater meaning and impact to every lesson that we design and implement with our students. Okay, so we do need reflection. We do need to understand who we are as people, our philosophies, our the things that we're thinking, our personal experiences, the way that we bring that into the space is extremely important. And we want our lessons, we want our students to have meaningful learning experiences. So additionally, your teaching philosophy, okay, is not just abstract, it's not just an idea, but when applied, it does shape every stage of your course design, your course from design to delivery. And then also when your philosophy drives your design, okay, your teaching becomes not only consistent, which your learners enjoy, but also deeply personal and purposeful. Okay, again, we are invested in our teaching, we're invested in our learners, and we do that first by investing in ourselves and knowing our why. Remember, if you don't know your why, you really can't understand your how, at least not truly effectively. So I encourage you and I urge you to think about what your philosophy is. I always say that in my philosophy, teaching is not a monologue, and it's not lost on me that I'm teaching at you right now and I'm speaking. But I love, that the learning space to be. I love for the learning space to be a reciprocal. I should not be the only voice that my students hear. I should not be the only person that's giving knowledge, but my students should be giving knowledge to their peers and then also to myself, right? So again, understanding what your teaching philosophy is and how it's continually evolving to evolve with your learners is extremely important. So let's continue here. And like I said, very slide heavy. And I'm going to read these questions to you. And these are for you to reflect and think on. Okay. I'm just going to read these. I'm going to take about 2 minutes to do that. What do I want students to, excuse me for just a second, to feel, to understand, or carry forward because of their experience with me? I want you to think about the emotional, intellectual, and interpersonal impact. Bullet number 2, describe a moment when you felt most effective in your teaching. What values of yours were at play and what contributed to that moment? Bullet number 3, which part of your current teaching practice feels most aligned with your values and which parts feel misaligned? Okay, and that goes back to that educator reflection wheel that I showed to you earlier. Number 4, how do students experience your values in the classroom, whether that's explicitly or implicitly? Okay. On to the right-hand side of the screen, bullet number 5 says, if someone were to read your syllabus or observed a class, what might they assume you value, and would they be right? What is that? Number 6, how do you make space for student voice, identity, or autonomy in course design? A lot of the time, we're focused on instructor-centered learning rather than student-centered learning, allowing them to have the floor. They're not involved in the planning. They're not involved in the themes of the classroom. Do you invite autonomy into your classroom? Where's the student voice, or is it just yours? The second to last bullet says, what part of your teaching philosophy do you still wrestle with or want to grow into more fully? Again, whenever I've interviewed for any kind of educational role, one of the first questions is, what is your teaching philosophy? And like I said, for a very long time, I did not have an answer, and that was to my detriment. And so like I said, I urge you to really think about these questions so that way you can understand who you are as a person and who you are in your educational space. And then finally, what would you like your students to say about you 10 years from now? What does that tell you about your teaching now? So these are some very, very, very thoughtful questions that I want you guys to think about as we move forward. Okay, and I'm going to give you some time. I actually have some prompts for you in just a little bit, but I want to make sure that that you're thinking. Like I said, this is designed with reflection in mind, and so I'm going to stop speaking for a second so that way you can hear your own voice in your mind. And I've got some teaching like sentence frames, if you will. So I want you to be able to connect your teaching philosophy to your approach. So here's some more bullets, and I'm going to stop teaching for or stop talking for maybe about 4 minutes. And you're not going to complete this within the time that we have allotted for ourselves, but they are some food for thought. And I would love for you guys to share. You don't even have to share an order. You can just choose a bullet or two and then pop it into the chat box. But this is because I believe that students learn best when bullet number 2, my belief in something guides my use of what? Number 3, I see teaching as, and therefore I often finish the sentence. To reflect my value of something, I incorporate what into my instruction. I believe that blank is central to meaningful learning, so I design lessons that. And then finally, because I view my role as blank, I focus on. So I'm going to, like I said, stop for just a second. And you can choose one. You can try and answer as many as possible. But just some food for thought, just a little bit of reflection. And again, I invite you guys to do this on your own in your own space after our session together. But I'll give you guys maybe 2 minutes. Okay, 2 minutes. And again, while you're typing, while you're thinking, I'll go ahead and turn off my camera. But I do want you to have some space, so I'll silence myself now while you choose what you'd like to respond to. Take about maybe 1 more minute. I know that these are very thoughtful questions. They involve a lot of critical thinking, so I completely understand if we're not there yet. But I do see some interesting things in the chat box, so I'm just going to read those really quickly. They're responding to previous questions and not pauses. I would like to contribute what I have learned and leave a legacy. I would like to change how I was taught and teach my students how I want to be taught. That's so deep. That's so meaningful. As Christina says, student engagement is about how happy and engaged students are. Didn't manage to note it down. I'll make sure that you have that. Malik says, when I help them understand what exactly is going on throughout the lesson. Thank you. Thank you so much, you guys. Again, these are very thoughtful questions, and I know that they are not capable, not especially not all of them being answered in the short time that we have allotted. But again, I urge you to focus on, what you think and understand how that is guiding your philosophy and your approach. So really quickly, this is maybe a few of the last slides. Personal reflection. I want you guys to have some thoughtful and some practical ideas for reflection, right? I told you, reflect. But how do we do that? So personal reflection, keep a teaching journal, write short entries after lessons about what went well, what didn't, and what surprised you. Use voice notes. We all have our phones present. Right after your lesson, record quick reflections on your phone immediately after class about what went well and what didn't while your thoughts are still fresh. Set weekly reflection prompts like what challenged me this week and when did my students seem most engaged, or maybe the opposite, when were they least engaged, right? Student-focused reflection. Okay, so remember I said with the scholarship, it's important that we're not just reflecting by ourselves, but also in groups, in pairs, with our students, with our colleagues. So ask for anonymous feedback. Use a simple form of sticky notes, like one thing I liked, one thing I changed, and one thing I learned. I use this all the time in my classes, you guys, and it really, really helps well with my lessons. Reflect on student engagement. Note when students seem most involved or confused and what patterns emerge. Review student work with a reflective lens. Instead of just grading, ask, what does this tell me about how I taught this concept? And that's very humbling, very, very humbling, because then we have to say, I probably didn't teach this concept very well. What can I do to change this? Collaborative reflection, peer observations, invite a trusted colleague to observe and give feedback or do co-reflections after watching each other teach. Teaching circles or discussion groups. Meeting regularly with educators to share challenges, strengths, and strategies and takeaways like you guys are doing today. Mentoring or coaching, and reflect with someone who's more experienced or less to gain fresh perspectives. Data-driven reflection. So compare students' pre and post assessments. Ask yourself what helped or hindered their growth. Track your own goals. Remember, we have that educator reflection wheel now. You guys can you can use those 7 categories, or you can track your own goals completely new from what I've presented you with today. And we're going to set those SMART goals, right? Set small, specific teaching goals and revisit them monthly. Am I giving clear instructions? How do I know that? Am I using more student-centered techniques? And then finally, the last category is creative or visual reflection. So create mind maps or visual summaries. Sketch what your lessons looked and felt like and how you'd adjust it next time. And you can also ask your students to do that. That's really a fun activity. Record your lessons, especially if you're in an online space. That works really well and is very easy, but make sure that you have permission to do that. And then watch yourself teach. Notice your tone, your body language, and your students' responses. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with these reflective questions. I'm not going to go through them because we're lacking time. But again, when we consider our teaching philosophy, when we reflect on what it is that we believe, what we know, what we do, how we come into the classroom, it's important, right? So as you look at these questions, you're going to revisit them regularly, and your responses will grow and evolve, and so will your impact with your classroom. So what I want to do really quickly, I want to say thank you, first of all, for allowing me to occupy a bit of your time and your space on your Saturday. Like I said, I don't take it lightly that you've chosen to spend your time growing with me and learning with me. I would love to continue the conversation and to stay connected. So you have my WhatsApp information. You also have my LinkedIn information and my email address if you would like some clarification. While you're looking at that, you guys can take a screenshot or whatever you need to do. I also have a Padlet QR code, which is the same link that I put in the chat box, and I'll do that one more time. Let me do that one more time, and I'll show that to you. So that way you know what you will see when you're there. Okay, so let me pull this down for just a second. And stop sharing and share again, just to make sure that you guys see everything. Okay, so what you see here are all the materials that we just went over. So you see that educator reflection wheel. So that way you have the tool in order to shade it in and see if it would roll smoothly or if there's some areas for improvement. See your strengths. You also have a blank one. Like I said, my goals, my priorities might not be your priorities, and that's completely okay. So I created a blank one, so that way you can write in your 7 goals, or maybe you can create your own with AI, or even just handwritten, to create your own goals and to see where your strengths and your shortfalls may be. I've also included my full presentation, so that way you can go back and reflect on all those questions that I shared with you. But then also too, remember I told you that I adapted this educator reflection wheel from Tony Robbins, who again is just life coach extraordinaire. And so I wanted you to understand how he used it. So remember, we build ourselves, we're people first, and we build ourselves as people before any role, any title that we have. So maybe it would be worth it to go back and say, okay, how can I improve myself as a person in order to improve myself as an educator, in order to improve my practices for my students in the classroom? Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing one more time and go back to my presentation just to share those last tools are just my contact information. I'm going to open up the floor. Is there anything that I can clarify? Is there anything that I can answer? Comments, questions, concerns? Let me make sure that I see everything. And you're welcome. Of course, Christina, my pleasure. Thank you. Okay. Well, that brings me, oh, where can I get the most comprehensive guide to the latest teaching philosophies? Oh, that's a really great question. And what I can do, and I honestly, I don't know that. I don't know how to answer that question because there's teaching philosophies that are in a lot of different spaces. And if you notice, I didn't actually share a philosophy because there's so many that exist. So I would encourage you to do your research. But what I can also do is on the Padlet, I can share some really great teaching philosophies and guides that I found, and I can actually incorporate that onto the Padlet. So stay tuned for that. And thank you so much for the question. You're welcome, you guys. Thank you so much for your time.
Hey, thank you, Courtney, for everything today.